Okay.
Yes, so good
Mm.
evening once again, Carmen. So
Yeah.
today is our sixth day of this training, and we will continue what we started last time or last yesterday. Yes, yesterday,
Yesterday. Uh-huh.
wherein we talked about um the specific
Teaching.
stages and steps that we have to take in teaching vocabulary or grammar. What
Yes,
are
yesterday we made vocabulary and grammar, right?
Yes, what are the
Mhm.
things we need to consider first when we are teaching vocabulary and grammar to make it conversational, right?
Uh-huh. To make
So,
it conversational and engaging for students, right?
correct, yes.
Okay.
So, mm,
Crescent. Crescente.
yes, correct. Use the shorter one, LPT.
Wow. Oh,
Uh,
that's from yesterday. Mhm.
yes. So now, today, we are going to talk about listening and reading, or
Reading.
the receptive skills or the input
Written.
skills.
Input.
Yes. In
Okay.
because we receive input, we receive information through listening and reading, right? And listening and reading are important skills, and they play an important role in our teaching because students get their information, get knowledge, get whatever you're teaching through listening and reading.
Is
So,
you
yeah.
think, for example, if you listen almost the whole day to English podcasts or TV series, you
Mhm.
will finally be able to speak fluently?
I believe so. We call that immersion. You know what?
Right.
One example, my cousin's son. My cousin doesn't speak good English. She can
Okay.
understand, but she doesn't speak because she's a housewife and she stays at home only. But she always leaves her son in front of the TV in the morning while she's
Uh-huh.
cleaning the house and doing household chores. And then one day, she found out her son was speaking in English. And she was surprised. And her son was just 3 years old, you
Oh
know?
my God.
So
Yes.
3 years old could already speak some words in English, which she didn't teach. That's the
Mm-hmm.
power of having your
Listen.
English environment around you.
Uh-huh.
Although another
Well,
factor there is, as they say, the child's brain is, open from womb until 6 years old. So this is the best, well, according to some studies, this is the best time that we teach children language or anything because their brain is still open and
yes.
slowly it closes down going the age of 7. So
Uh-huh.
yes, that's I think one example, one instance that having an English environment helps. So even
Mm-hmm.
though she didn't teach the child learned some basic English words and phrases in English. And now her son is what, 9 or 10 years old. He can speak English fluently without any
Yeah.
difficulty.
Ah, okay.
Although he is already studying now, but unlike maybe some children who didn't expose themselves to English environment, will struggle learning, will make an effort. But in his case, if you speak to him, he can answer easily, and he studies English, he studies quickly. So that's
Oh
the
my
effect
God.
of having an English environment. And
Okay.
also the one I think I've shared with you, a Korean student who surrounded herself with English materials at home. When he came to the Philippines to study English, it was very fast. The progress was quick. And I think
Mhm.
that's because of the uh, environment that she was in. So it helps. But of course, you
helps.
have to make an effort. You have to make an effort.
Yes, because everybody at home speaks your native language, no?
Correct. Yes.
Mhm.
And sometimes you will get students who would say, "Teacher, I want to speak like you," but don't make an effort. When you call them in class, they will not participate. When you give them homework, they don't do the homework. When
Oh
you
my
ask them
God.
to do an activity, they don't want to do the activity. And then they want to be like you. How is that possible? So English is a skill, just like any other skill, like driving, carpentry, or whatever, baking, pottery. As a skill, it needs effort. You have to hone it, use it, practice it to perfect it.
Thank you.
So yeah, just like driving also. I always, my analogy to learning language is always like driving. So if
Yes.
you are a driver and you stop driving for a while, it would feel, strange to go back to
Strange.
driving. Mm. And especially
You lose
when,
distance.
yeah,
No,
again,
you lose distance between the cars.
yes, correct. And also, especially when there are new cars, new models, you might not know how to manipulate or use those new, new thing being placed inside the car, from
Yes.
manual to automatic. Maybe. So English
Yes.
is also like that. So in the past, there were basic English ways of constructing sentences, vocabulary, but now there are new modern words that we use to describe something. So just like, cars. And also when, for example, you're a driver, but you stay away driving for a while, and then you are exposed to maybe nature, you're into maybe sailing, boating, not anymore driving, your interest would shift also to the new activity you're doing, right? So that's why it has to be sustained continuously, because
Continue.
our brain, our mind, our human nature is very vulnerable and flexible, that it can adapt to wherever you put your place in, right?
Yes.
So the same with English. If you place yourself in an English environment, it will also adapt to an English environment. Now, I am in Vietnam, for example. In the beginning, when I first came here, I can't speak Vietnamese and I can't understand a single word. Vietnamese sound to me is like murmur, like there's no meaning. But every day I go out, I interact and hear local people speaking their language. So from time to time, I can hear some sounds. Then the sound from the smallest sound becomes a syllable, becomes a word. Now I can hear, although I cannot understand fully, but I can hear some sound because
And
the
can you talk?
environment. A little bit, just just to survive, just to count and to tell the driver of the taxi direction where to go, or to stop, or to move left, right, or to buy food. The most important is
Buy
buying food.
food, yes.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
How to say take away or dine in, or how much. Yeah. Very basic. And that's human
Very-
nature. We learn what is basic initially. Mm. And our needs become more and more as we progress.
Yes.
Now,
Okay.
did I answer your question?
Thank you so much.
Yes. Now, sorry. When it comes to listening and reading first, what do you think of reading activities? Should it be silent reading or reading aloud? What do you think?
Oh, I prefer reading aloud. If I
Why?
have to choose
You
between the two,
or you to your students? Do you
for
want
my
to read
students,
aloud as a student, or you want your students to read aloud?
oh, well, it depends on the level of the students, no? Because, for example, if they are able to read a content and think about it, probably first I will give them something to read, and then probably they can read aloud some parts of it, you know.
But according to Professor McKay of Oxford, he's a trainer of Oxford Publishing Company. Reading must be silent activity.
Silent, yes.
Why? We read as an input, okay? We read because we need input. We read because we want to learn and comprehend. But if we read aloud, there will be other factors affecting our comprehension in reading. Number one, we become shy because what if I will mispronounce a word, right? So that will somehow affect our understanding of what we're reading. So we focus more on pronunciation rather than understanding. Number two, it increases anxiety level of the student. So he said, reading must be silent.
Okay.
In that case, after reading silently, or maybe the teacher is going to model, the teacher will read aloud and students will read following what the teacher was reading through their eyes. Reading silently, following the teacher, or the audio when the teacher plays it and the students are going to follow the audio, can be like that. Then that's a time that you ask them to read some parts aloud, but do not begin with reading aloud. Yes.
Okay.
Because again, some students might, just like one example, I had many crazy experiences. One student, I asked one Korean teenager, okay, read the story. And then he read nicely. And then after that, I said, okay, number one question. And then he told me, teacher, wait, you just told me to read, not to understand. So he was just reading without understanding it, you see? And so
he was focused on the pronunciation.
Yeah, so he was focused on pronouncing words and reading aloud. So I forgot, actually, it was partly my fault because I forgot to give correct instructions. I should have said, you're going to read and then understand because I will ask you questions. That should be the complete and correct instructions, right? So it was partly my fault. So I at the back of my head, I was just, laughing because of this situation. There are kids like that. There are students who are like that. Question?
Hey, some teachers say that, for example, when you give a reading or a listening, then you must tell the students what to do, but what they have to do, but also tell them you are going to answer to a question, or you have or something like a task, so that the students focus on the reading or the listening, no?
Correct, yes. And the teacher must be explicit in saying these tasks and activities. Explicit.
Okay.
You cannot imply it only, or let students assume that you want them to do it. You have to explicitly say it, just like what happened in that example I gave you. I just thought because he is able to read, I just asked him to read. But then all the while I thought that he understood what I meant by read. It is to read and to understand and answer questions later. But it turned out that he was only literally following my instruction of to read. And so that's what he did, just to read without understanding.
But do you explicitly tell them the questions, or you keep them for the end?
In that case, depends on the stage of the reading, but reading per se should be accompanied, coupled with while reading activities. It must be while reading activities, meaning if we, that's already our lesson. I will just move to the next one. So here are the stages now. That's what you are asking. when we teach listening or reading, we must begin with predicting activity. Okay, so what is predicting
Like a
activity?
warm-up.
Not warm up. Warm up is way early. Now it's a
Okay.
study. Okay, in the study, you also have to begin with predicting activity. Meaning by predicting activity, you can just probably before reading, ask them, look at the picture and the story, look at the title. So this is a way to make students think critically. What is the title? For example, My Summer Vacation. So look at the title. What are we going to read about this story? And then say, teacher, summer vacation. Yes, very good, because that's what the title. Now, when it's summer vacation, what do you think is the weather? What do you think is the kind of clothes that people wear? These are predicting questions, okay? Or look at the picture. By the way, when you say look at the picture, you have to be very specific also. Look at the picture. What is the girl doing in the picture? Okay. Don't just say, talk about the picture in the story. Because some students will say, why teacher, can you not say, can you not look at the picture? Can you not tell what's in the picture? You know, so you have to be very specific. What is the girl doing in the picture? What is the girl wearing in the picture? Where do you think the girl is going? So these are very specific questions about the picture. And through this, you elicit from them ideas about the story. See? So according to Professor McKay, also aside from reading as a silent activity, in the beginning, before reading, the student or students must be able to get an idea of what it is they're going to read, because this will trigger their curiosity. Okay, so you're trying to feed their curious minds, so they will be excited to read. So after predicting activity, we are teaching here predicting skills. Predicting skills is important in test-taking strategy, right? So when students try to answer an article, maybe IELTS article, TOEFL, or TOEIC, or Cambridge articles, they must, it's part of our teaching, it's part of our, you know, the skill that we have to train them to have is the predicting skills. They have to learn how to look at the title and the pictures, and from there draw conclusions about what the article is all about. That's number one. Next to that is pre-teaching of vocabulary. So we, well and good if the book already has selected some vocabulary for us. But if there's no vocabulary yet, then it's up to you to select. But it supposedly and hopefully not more than 10 words.
Oh, okay.
A good number is 7, because vocabulary should be taught around 7 minutes only. Not too long. And
7
then,
minutes
yeah,
for 7 words?
7 minutes, 7 words, or around that time. Why not more than 10? Because it will be too long, too lengthy, and you are dragging the activity. It will become boring later. So what do you do in pre-teaching vocabulary? MPF, introduce and elicit meaning, practice pronunciation, and identify the form, the spelling, or the structure of the word. Just like the vocab that we talked about earlier. So pre-teach. In pre-teaching of vocabulary, hopefully it can be in a creative way also. Don't just say the word and let them repeat, but maybe you can put it in, let's say, like a game. You know, I always, why one teacher, when during my training, one teacher commented, Teacher Ace, what do you always say? Game, activity. Why can't it be a simple presentation of vocabulary and meaning? Why can't it be like that? My answer to that is when students are given activity and with time element involved, and also there is competition, it excites them. And when our brain is excited, it can perform at its best, rather than giving comfort to your brain. When your brain is at its, comfort zone, it will not produce much. It will not make an effort. So give them some challenges and activities and competition in order to push them harder to work harder. So that's why it's always activity, game, competition. So
Excellent.
vocabulary. Then after that, it's skimming.
Skimming.
Read quickly to get the gist. Okay. And so this is now the answer to your question. Do you give them question while reading? So in skimming activity, there is what we call gist question. Have you heard of that? Gist question,
Yes.
G-I-S-T,
Uh-huh.
gist question. So before you ask them to read very quickly, you post a question. For example, Jack and the Beanstalk. What was, after the chicken clucked, something came out that was on the ground. What was it? Something like that. It has to be short, but my question was too long. So
Okay.
you ask a question, and the answer to this question must be found at the last part of the story. Okay,
Oh.
why? So that they can go and look for it. And by doing so, they are already skimming, reading very quickly, looking for the answer. Could be.
For example, who is the murderer
Yes,
in this
and it should
story?
have,
And they have to
yes,
read everything.
yes. Or if they are maybe elementary kids, could be jigsaw reading. Cut the story into paragraph and and rearrange it and let them rearrange to form the order of the story. That can be also skimming activity. So there is an activity while reading. Otherwise, they will not read. Students will not read. Even adults, they don't read. And some adults, the problem there is they read also. It's either they don't read or they read carefully. And you don't want them to read carefully in skimming because that's not yet the time that they need to read thoroughly. It's
like an overview.
Yes, just to get the whole picture of the story.
The whole picture.
After skimming, you have scanning. Now, in scanning, again, this must be while reading activities. There are two kinds. It is to read for information and to read for details. What's the difference between the two? When you say read for information, while reading, students are going to answer who is, where is, what is, when is, specific answers, okay? Numbers, names, places. That is specific information. However, the reading for details is different because you need to read carefully some part, maybe the whole sentence, the whole paragraph, in order to find the answer. Usually, the reading for details questions are true or false, or why questions, or yes or no. So they have to answer yes or no, true or false questions. And to find the answer, they have to read the sentence, the paragraph, or a certain portion in order for them to understand and find the answer. That is scanning activity. So again, while reading, they have to do it. Now, if you want to do some controlled practice later on, some books already give you skimming activity and scanning activity. And if you want to have more activities because you still have time, then give them controlled practice. Or some books already give you controlled practice also. Controlled practice could be a mix of using the vocabulary to fill in the blanks. Could be like that. Then prayer practice. Prayer practice is apply what was learned in the story in their own way, in their own understanding, with their own input. And then after praying prayer practice, of course, you give them delayed feedback or reinforcement if there's need to reinforce. So this is for reading. How about listening? How do we do listening? The same. You have to have predicting activity, maybe because it's listening, so there's no text. So you maybe want to write the title on the board of the story that they're going to hear, or you're going to show a picture of what they're going to hear. And then from the picture, from the title, tell them to guess, predict, think ahead what's the story that they were going to hear later. Then pre-teach vocabulary. Now in skimming, how do you listen quickly?
The first time, yes.
Yes. So here, the same, give them gist question, but instead of giving them the text, let them listen. So listen and find the answer to the question, right?
The general question.
Yeah, a general question. Or sometimes what I do is I have, we call it active listening activity. Active listening activity. So what I do, I scan first the audio and I pick certain words that are mentioned all throughout, like from start until the end. Maybe not too many also, but certain words that are repeated a couple of times until the end. So what I do is, if I would say, okay, everybody stand, and then we're going to listen. If you hear this word, move to the left. If you hear this word, move to the right. Just that, so that I would know that they're listening. If they will not move, it means they did not hear the word. So that is active listening. That can be in the skimming. They don't answer a specific one. They just have to listen to specific one word and for me to know that they're listening to the audio.
So anytime the word is pronounced, they have to move just to the right or to the left.
They listen
down.
Yes, they listen to the story Jack and the Beanstalk maybe. And then every time they hear the word giant, or they hear the giant speaking, they have to, like because I taught that in elementary kids. So I said, if you hear the giant speaking, you have to jump. So they have to jump.
Okay.
So other kids, they're surprised why others are jumping because they did not hear the giant speaking. So you see, so these are active listening activities for you as teachers to know that they are listening. Because for us teachers, we wouldn't know if they're listening or not, right? It's not enough that we tell them, okay, listen, I will play and listen. And then how can we be so sure that they're listening? To tell them to do an action. So yeah, that can be, aside from answering questions, of course, for skimming. Okay. Now for scanning, what I do is I give them fill in the blank. So that the script of the story with missing words, so they listen and then they answer. Or excellent. It could be they just have to listen and I give them questionnaire to answer. So listen and answer WH questions or true or false questions while listening. No text. It depends on the level. So sometimes low level, I give them the transcript. Okay.
You never give them the transcript, or
For no,
when you are
but with
when you
missing.
finish. Oh, no, I mean that probably you can give them the transcription after the class is over, or no?
Yes, yeah, you can give them the transcript, but for example, I'm teaching maybe elementary level students, and then I give them play and answer WH question. Some of them cannot answer. If I notice that maybe 50% got low score, I will not do like this again. Instead, first, I will ask them to I will give them the transcript, but with missing words. So they listen and read and
And
answer the
feel.
yeah, fill in the gaps or fill in the blanks first, then answer questions. Because maybe they are not yet ready to do plainly listening and answering questions right away. So in the beginning, I will do that. Then maybe after a few times of doing it, I will give them higher level kind of activity, just purely listening and answering questions. But the most important here is predicting, pre-teaching, skimming, scanning, and then freer practice
Your practice.
in this order, meaning they have to apply what was learned, whatever they've heard and read, they must apply it in real life, because that's the point of studying and using this article, this material in class.
Mhm.
When we read about Jack and the Beanstalk, when we listen about Jack and the Beanstalk, it's not because we want to learn the vocabulary of giant, chicken. Why do we care about giant and chicken? That's not what we are teaching. But in Jack and the Beanstalk, what we are teaching is traditional story. So we want our students to identify that stories like this, we call it traditional story. And maybe they have similar story in their own country, in their own town. So my freer practice, whenever I teach Jack and the Beanstalk, I tell them, think in pairs, in groups of a story similar to Jack and the Beanstalk. It's not a real story, but a story that involves some unbelievable characters like giants and climbing into the sky and beans growing so tall, something like that. It's not real, but you know, we hear stories like this. And maybe, for example, you're teaching
Like the
European,
Avengers. Like the
right?
Avengers, the
Yeah,
heroes.
Avenger, yes. So maybe you have similar stories like that in Peru, because that's what normal people, we share stories of our culture, our the maybe the story behind our city, something like that. Like in the Philippines, we have a place called not called, but there is a city here, not say a province with many chocolate hills. It's like
Wow, chocolate hills.
brown,
Wow.
yeah, because it's called chocolate hills because it's brown, and
Okay.
like small chocolate around the whole town. And when it's summer, it turns brown, so it becomes chocolate. When it's rainy, it turns green because the plants will turn green.
Yes.
Well, when you go there,
It's
and
beautiful. Yes.
the children, we know the story. There is a story behind it. So when foreigners come to their place, they say, "Wow, why is it called Chocolate Hills?" Because they say many years ago there were two giant friends fighting. They were throwing mud to each other, and the mud formed small hills and became chocolate hills. So that's the story, right? So same thing in many places, there are stories in their own town and their own city that they can share. So they would know how to share it by learning
Excellent.
Jack and the Beanstalk. Yeah. So that's the whole point here. Question.
Control practice.
Reading and listening are good source of grammar or vocabulary. So when I teach vocabulary, I look for articles where vocabulary words or the words that I am teaching can be found and used in that story, or the grammar can be found in that story.
Okay, but before this structure, Ace, you have to do the first part about the warm up and the
Yes,
leading, no?
yes. So
Okay.
lead in, warm up. So I have lead in and warm up. Maybe if it's gonna be Jack and the Beanstalk, my warm up or my lead in would be, what was that? I don't know. In the Philippines, we have this longest line race. So I divide the class into two or maybe three, depends how many students. Then they are going to compete in making the longest line using whatever they have. Maybe their bags, their belts, their clothes for men, if they can remove it. Make a
Oh my
line.
God.
Yes.
Yes.
And the first to make the longest will be the winner. Only that.
Oh my
Just
God.
why? Because we can connect this. The longest line could symbolize the beanstalk growing up the sky, right? Something like that. So that's just how we can connect it. I'd say,
Excellent.
yeah.
Mhm.
So, but the point there is find an activity that you can connect to the lesson, not just any kind of activity that you can enjoy and have fun.
Okay.
Okay.
They
So
have to be
anything?
connected.
Yes, they have to be connected. Otherwise, when your
Would be
supervisor is going to be watching and observing you will ask, why this activity? And then say, it's for fun. No, it cannot just be for fun. There must be direct relationship of all the activities. Otherwise, your teaching is not coherent.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank
question?
you. No more.
Okay. So my next, here is an example of reading. This is a reading text. So you have, as you can see, so many activities, right? So this is the reading part, on page 15, and you have here activities on page 14. So maybe because the reading is about a day in the life of an online student, so you have here activity 1 is match the words in the box with pictures A to J. So, but before that, maybe you want to say, look at the picture for predicting. Look at the picture of these two kids. On the left, there's a girl wearing red shirt. What do you think she's doing? She's listening to music, teacher. Do you think she's just listening to music? No, she's also writing. And what is she looking at? A computer, a laptop. Very good. So what do you think she's doing? She's studying. Is she studying in the classroom? No, at home, in her room, maybe. And then, so that's predicting, right? So, and then you ask about the boy also. And then after that, then you do pre-teaching of vocabulary. Match the words or phrases in the box to the pictures A to J. And then
Okay.
after that, you have here your activity number 3. Look at the pictures and read the title of the article. Answer the questions, what day and time is it? So that's the skimming reading, right? Gist. And number 4, read and listen. Although it says read and listen, but if your focus is reading, read. Read to the article. What daily routine activities do the students do? So just your while reading scanning activity. And This one, you can have these as your controlled practice, or could be uh, part of the while reading, some of these while reading activities. Okay. Now, because this is a day in the life of an online student, and how do you apply this in real life?
Oh, Ace, for example, number 4,
Mhm.
it says read and listen to the article. Read and
Yes.
listen to the article. What daily routine activities do the students do? For example, this can be a freer practice if you give them as a practice.
No, this is controlled. This is a controlled practice because they have to read and find the answer here. Number 4. They are going to read and identify and look for the daily routine activities mentioned in the story about these two students.
Oh, okay.
The freer practice is when you ask them
Critical thinking there.
yes, when you ask them one of these critical thinking questions, or maybe if you want to simplify this, you tell them, okay, I want you to write about your life as an online student. So what time do you wake up? What time is your first class? What do you study? So they make maybe a timetable, and then they're going to share and present to their seatmates, to their partners about their online class. So I think most students now can have something to share about the online class, about online student life. So that's the freer now. They talk about their own online student life.
So you mean they have to talk about their online activities, but
Yes.
is it by writing or speaking? How do
It
you
could
do that?
be initially by writing, as I've mentioned. If you want them to make a timetable, then they will make first a timetable, so they have something to show, and then they're going to talk about their timetable to their classmates.
Okay, that's easier. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Normally, and ideally, I don't just ask students to speak. I ask them to first write or prepare something in writing. Why? Because I need to collect the papers. I need to collect their outputs as my proof and evidence that they have done something in class, right? And also we can have it as their portfolio, collection of materials that they have created, right? I don't know if it's a part of your criteria to have portfolio of your language students.
Not too much,
Mm.
but every cycle,
Mm.
we give them some projects, so
Mm.
they have to prepare that project, and that is like the portfolio, because
Yes.
it involves the whole month, for example,
Yes. So
on preparing that topic.
in my case, maybe each unit there must be a creative output that students are going to submit, or I'm going to
Yes.
collect. Not necessarily grand or big or special, but just an output that I can collect because I will put them like they have a portfolio folder, just like a plastic folder that they're going to insert so that by the end of the whole course, they have something to show to their parents. Look, mom, this is what you've paid for for the whole course. So,
Yes,
parents love looking at their children's output.
yes. For example, like to prepare things about fashion, no?
Yes, yes.
Yes. So it's
In
nice.
that case, yes, for teenager, there is a Cambridge book that talks about fashion. So in that sense, I ask my students to create their own model and fashion, like a not really
Really?
doll, but could be just picture. Yeah, they cut out certain shapes and form them into like a paper model. So that's
Yes.
their output.
And they learn a lot of new words, when
Yes,
doing these projects.
because they will, for example, they're going to, I would tell them, you create a formal clothes,
For
of
business.
a model with a formal clothes. So they will cut out some, maybe a coat and a tie or a tuxedo and shoes. So, and after they formed it, they have to talk about it. So my model wears black tuxedo. So they can show and use the word now.
Yes, that's
Tuxedo,
excellent.
like black shoes, slacks. Okay. And
Yes,
it's fun
for
for
example,
teenagers.
yes, and they have to choose the best outfit, no?
Yes. Like
So
you're going to
it's
model
fun.
and select the best
Yes.
model.
Uh-huh.
Okay,
Yes,
so
they like to be creative.
correct, correct. Yes, for teenagers and teenagers and primary students, they love creating stuff. Hmm. Anything else about reading and listening?
No. Oh, this part about critical thinking,
Mhm.
no. So it's part of the freer practice.
Yes, this can be used for freer practice. This
Uh-huh.
book is designed to have critical thinking uh, portion during the reading part. Okay, so that the purpose of critical thinking is how we can apply this reading material into our own real life
To realize.
scenario.
Uh-huh.
Mm.
Yeah,
Because
it says super skills.
the yes, the book teaches that materials that we listen are just springboard for real life use. Okay,
Mm.
and how we can bring it to real life. That's why you have to have this portion, critical thinking. So students are challenged to use this in their own experience. Okay.
Excellent.
Now, moving forward, writing and
Mhm.
speaking. After
Oh
the
my
input,
God, writing.
after the input, you have now the output skill or the productive skill. Very common problem in writing and speaking is that teachers also assume that students already know. For example, when teacher tells the students, write about your summer vacation, write about your weekend activities. Teachers think that students can write and can speak about that easily because it's their own experience. But actually, that's wrong to think.
No.
You have to facilitate because writing and speaking, the most important part here is the process, not the output. Okay,
Mm.
so many students don't like to write, don't like to speak because maybe they got traumatized by the wrong sequencing of activities. You know, when teacher just ask them to speak and write right away without even laying down the foundation, scaffolding, guiding them how to create that output. And that's the most important. The process that we go through from start to end. Now, what are these procedures? So the first one is, of course, this is after the lead-in and the warm-up. So in the
Mm.
study, there must be a model presentation, meaning if you want them to speak or write, show to them an example output that you want them to use as a model. Because students are still learning. They cannot just imagine and come up with their own output on their own. There must be, for example, you want them to talk about summer vacation. Maybe you want to show a video of a kid talking about his summer vacation. Okay. Now, from that model, you highlight the target language. So maybe you ask, okay, after watching the video, where did the kid go? What activities did the kid do? Because that's what you want to highlight, the vocabulary, the words that you want them also to use later on, right? Or maybe the grammar structure. Or if it's writing, after showing them a letter of someone writing to another friend abroad about his or her summer vacation, you would ask the student, look at the letter. Where is the date written? What comes after the date? What comes after the address? It's the dear, so and so. Is there margin on left and right side of the paper? Do you have
Wow.
indentation? So the structure of the letter is what you're trying to teach them, right? Through the model. And then after highlighting the target lesson, then you do controlled practice. Maybe you ask them questions, ask them to do some activities to reinforce if they really understood what was highlighted. Some students will just say yes, yes, yes. But when you ask them to do it, they are not yet ready. So controlled practice is done to make sure that what was done, the 2 steps that you have given, they were understood clearly, right? Very
So there
short, quick
you
activity. Yes?
so there you practice the ICQ and the CCQ
CCQ.
questions.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
yes. To make sure that they understood what
Okay.
was presented. Don't just say, okay, watch the video, and then after watching the video, then you tell them, okay, you will be in groups, you brainstorm, and then still you end up nothing. Or maybe some of them, teacher, can you help us? What are we going to do? That's the problem, because the teacher just went directly to brainstorming without checking if student really got what you're trying to teach them.
Ace, how
Yeah.
can you put there control practice and after that brainstorming? I don't understand.
Brainstorming, meaning they are now going to come up with their own. If it's
Ah,
gonna be a summer vacation video presentation, or it's gonna be a summer vacation letter writing, then they're going to come up with their own letter. Okay, so the controlled practice here is just to check whether the highlighted vocabulary, grammar, or whatever lesson you're teaching them was really understood before you put them in small groups. So it will be clearer and no more asking, teacher, help, teacher, teacher, teacher. Then you will be preoccupied going around. Okay, so this is just like a control check. This control
control
practice,
check.
yeah, just to control check. It's if it's like if it's a factory, you have a check and balance quality quality check before you put them into small groups and do the activity on their own. So by the time that they do the activity on their own, maybe they are 60-70% sure of what they are going to do. Now, here in the brainstorming, they will create, maybe your instruction is you create a letter following the model, okay, as a group. Now, what's the challenge here? Maybe there are 3 or 4 members in a group. Whose story are they going to write? So it's up to them. You have to discuss whose
Uh-huh.
story, right? But at least they will come up with a similar output to what you
Uh-huh.
presented. Or if it's going to be a speaking activity, again, before speaking, they have to put it in writing. And whose story are they going to write? It's going to be their choice now. If there are 3 or 4 members, of course, only one story will be presented. But at least the 3 will have an idea how they created that one story, right? Now, while students are doing that, teacher must go around to do immediate feedback. So check if what they're doing is according to your instruction. Do not wait until they finish and then you you give them feedback when they're done, and then you tell them it's wrong. You do it again. It's a waste of time, you know. So while students are doing the activity, go around and check and correct them if they need to be corrected.
So this will be also for the writing?
Yes,
The
writing and
feedback?
speaking, the same.
Oh,
Because again, before you speak, it must be put into writing. Many students, before they, of course, they will just memorize anyway. So they still have to write. They just have to write their script or their draft of their script. When we ask our students to do presentation, let's not make and give them a hard time. If they want to have like a script to read, it's okay, as long as they made it.
So in this part, writing and speaking, we have immediate feedback. But in listening and reading, we just have delayed feedback.
Yes, because we cannot stop the audio while they're listening. We cannot stop the audio and then give them feedback, right? So we have to wait until the audio is done or the reading is done. But
Okay.
here, because it is production, that is output. So before you have the final presentation of the output, you must already screen, you must pre-check that they will present something that is 90 to 95% correct and good.
Okay.
Then after the immediate feedback, then they do revisions at the same time, then they do presentation. So presentation must be mingling, not individual standing in front, because that's a waste of time. So they present to their peers, partners, move to another group, exchange members from different groups. So what I do, if it's gonna be a presentation, if I have 20 students, so I put them in four-member groups. So I have 5 groups, right? Then it's round robin, but the members are going to be going around. So one member from group 1 will move to group 2, and then he presents. Yes. And the same thing, from one member from group 2 will move to group 3. So the member from group 3 will move to group 4. So they are moving around, and then they try to explain and share and present. So if you have 20 students and 5 groups, 4 members are moving around, it's like you only ask 4 students to present, right? 4 cycles, because there are only 4 members in each group. So imagine that, how much time was cut and saved in doing this kind of presentation. And the question now is, how do you correct? How do you grade?
You have to watch them.
Aside from watching them, I also give the other, that's why they need to move to another group, because the other group is going to be their judge. So when they move, they hand out a piece of paper with like judges' criteria of like checking. So they put maybe a heart, a star, a check, something. I give them symbols. I don't give them points, because kids, they don't know the pointing system. But let's say if you like it very much, give a heart. If not so much, just star, like that. Or if it needs some improvement, just like a moon, whatever symbol you want to give them. Okay, so at least they have to write something. So that's the feedback that they get from the presentation. But of course, I have to go around to listen, because I still have to do delayed feedback. Maybe I will hear something that needs to be corrected. So we don't, again, end the class with loose ends. You have to properly end it.
With delayed feedback.
Yes, delayed feedback. Yes.
Good evening. Good evening, Carmen. How do
Hi.
you correct? Hi, how are you? How do you correct them? For example, if you are talking about present simple, if the student made a mistake, do you correct just the mistake, or you go back to the to teach how is this present simple made?
What is this lesson? Um, are you doing reading? Are you doing writing? Are you doing speaking or what?
Speaking.
For speaking, and it's presentation part or
Yes.
which part? So they're making presentation now. So they are talking and they're supposed to use present simple, but they made mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, because this is presentation, you just take note of the mistakes, and then in the delayed feedback, you make it as a comment, a general comment addressed to the whole class. So you should
Oh,
not
okay.
the presentation and make a comment like, I'm sorry, the teacher teaches, not taught. It should be present simple. You should not interrupt and butt in like that, because it will scare them and will not maybe continue doing the presentation. So for presentation, you have to wait until they all finish and do delayed feedback and correction.
And
But
in a general way.
supposedly during the brainstorming, you should go around and check their script, check their like whatever they're writing, uh, to know if they're using the right tense, they're using the right vocabulary, are they doing it right? So that's during brainstorming. That's why there is immediate feedback in brainstorming. While they are in groups, you go around. Did I answer
Okay.
your question, Lillian?
Yes, but when you do like one-to-one session, for example, if the student has to as an examination and he
Mm.
wants to or she wants to improve her speaking because mostly is what happens, right? The students take private sessions in order to improve their speaking. So how do
Yeah,
we,
well,
for example, we follow this presentation?
mhm. So for example, you're teaching the student because the student is taking speaking tests, right?
Yes.
So let's say in my case, I'm teaching some students to do IELTS speaking. Normally in the presentation part, it is like having actual speaking tests. So I am the speaking interlocutor, the student is the test taker. So I ask questions and the student is going to answer. Still, I have to jot down mistakes, and then I do delayed feedback later. And then we do which part he or she made a mistake, we do it again. So it's
Okay.
like, for example, because in speaking IELTS, there are three parts, the introduction, the part one, part two, part three. Maybe he made a mistake in part two, so I'll take that down, I'll take some notes. And then after everything was done, then I give feedback like part one is okay, but part two, you made this and that mistake. Can we redo it? So we now go back to part two, hoping that he or she will use the corrected form.
Mm.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Continue with part three of the test. But here's the catch. If the question is, if the student made a lot of mistakes from part one, part two, part three,
Start
if
again.
spends a lot of time, then you must decide which part you need to focus. Maybe you say, today, your performance needs more improvements because you made a lot of mistakes from part one, part two, part three. But let's correct first part one. You focus on one particular part. Why? According to, again, some experts, you have to teach for mastery, not correcting everything. Otherwise, you overwhelm and you end up losing everything. So quality is important than quantity. So focus on part one today, and then hoping that the next day, part one is already improved and better. Then you move to part two. Then you move to part three. We cannot correct everything right away, one time. Because test
Okay.
taking must be also, by parts.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
so if you want to focus also with grammar, for example, present simple, talk about present simple all the time. For speaking, there is, for example, IELTS, I'm familiar with IELTS. Part one is always about student background. So the grammar being used there is always either past simple or present simple, or present perfect, sometimes present perfect. When the students ask about, have you been to another country, for example, so they will talk about experience of going to another country. But mostly part one in IELTS is about self, so it's present simple or past simple. So in that case, you can already point out what grammar should be used in part one. So students can already have an idea, okay, I must make sure that I don't think of other complex grammar, but present simple, past simple, and present perfect only in part one. So if you correct using grammar, then focus on a certain grammar also. Okay. So the different parts of the test, there is a target. So you must understand what is the target of this part of the test.
Excellent.
Anything else?
Okay.
So that's the problem, because sometimes teachers are also pressured by students. The student would say, teacher, I need to pass the test. I only have 1 month to prepare. Now the teacher also is on a cramming state. But you should be in control. Go back to the basic. Stick to the rule. Do not let time to persuade you to, cut short the procedure of teaching and training the student just because we are running out of time. Some of my students would say, teacher, can I do 3-4 test practice in a day with you? Because my exam is fast approaching. I said, no, because it's quality over quantity. Definitely the second, the third practice test that you will have with me, the scores and the performance are poorer compared to the first one, and they can tell it. Based on their experience, they can tell it that that you're correct. My second practice, the third practice for the day, the score, the performance was of poor quality compared to my first one. I said, yes, because your brain can only accommodate one within the day. Otherwise, maybe rest for a long period, maybe in the afternoon, you can do that, or in the evening, but not successively, because that's cramming.
Yes. You get overwhelmed.
Yes. And no matter your physical body can handle it, but trust me, your mental capacity cannot. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
There are students that I allow to experience because they say, no, I can do it, teacher. Okay, well, let's try it. And then only to find out I'm correct. And then they would realize it themselves.
It's a
Okay,
process,
thank
no?
you.
Yeah, it's a process, correct. So
Yes.
you cannot have it in a hurry. Otherwise, it's
Yes.
gonna be half-baked. Yes, Karen?
No, you receive so much information, your brain cannot process everything.
Yes. And instead of retaining some, you lose all.
You lose. Yes, exactly. That's important.
Yes. Now, this is an example of from the book. So this is speaking. This part is the speaking. So you have a lot of steps to do. So the model, what was the first one that we talked about? So present a model. So maybe, what is this? Working together, answer. Look at 4 things students do in class. In which activity do you work together?
Teach yourself.
So if you have this part of the book and your lesson is speaking, maybe
Real world speaking. Oh,
hmm,
we can start with a geography quiz probably.
what is this? Let's check first. Create your own dialogue. It's about so this real world speaking is comparing answers with your classmate. It's peer checking, okay? Peer checking in English, because here, the dialogue here,
Yeah, working together.
yeah, what have you got in number 1? I've got Australia. Yes, me too. Okay, what about number 2? I've got blank Sydney. I think Sydney. Yes. And then, are you sure? I've got Canberra. Let's leave that one. Okay. So, Carmel and Lucas are trying to compare their answers here. So this is the real world speaking dialogue. So maybe this is already controlled practice, right? So, oops. So the video here, look at 4 things students do in class and which activities do you work together. So this is model. So 2 students are talking and comparing answers. So first is maybe you show this video and ask your students what are they doing? What is Carmel and Lucas doing in the video? Then students would say they are comparing answers. Why are they comparing answers? Are they cheating? No, they are just discussing who gets the right answer. Because in real world, we have that. We compare ideas, we compare answers, and
Yes,
it's
good
important
example.
we do it properly, right? And there is a proper vocab, proper question to do it. And that's what we're teaching. So after students watch the video, that is their model, then highlight the target lesson by asking them to answer number 1 and then look at the key phrases, right? Here in the box, if they can hear it from what students are talking. So basically, you just follow, at least this book, you follow 1, 2, 3
Yes, they are
steps.
good exercises.
Yes. And then control practice number 4. And then number 5, create your own dialogue. So now this is freer practice. When students create their own dialogue, they have to follow this skill boost box. They think, they prepare, they practice, they perform. But this time, they are now going to come up with their own dialogue, but following the model. Maybe they will not talk about Australia anymore or another, maybe other tests that they will compare. Maybe you say math answer. So maybe you ask your students, you compare answers in math, let's say. So not geography, because if it's geography, maybe some students will just copy.
Wow.